In this webcast, we're going to look at the kinds of metadata that are available on the BNC, the kind of data they've recorded about the texts that they have collected. Now, you'll be familiar with this page by now. If we want to look at some of this metadata, one way into this is to look at the written restrictions. So if we go there, we'll notice that there are a number of different restrictions that you can impose on a search, and these are related to the data that are recorded about different texts. So we could, if we wanted to, look at texts that were only written between these dates. Slightly more useful and interesting searches might be to look at the medium of the text. You might not be aware of this, but texts are sampled often according to parts of text. They wouldn't necessarily have a whole book, they might have the end of a book or a middle of a book. That's for longer texts. We've got different domains, text types. We'll be looking at these different variables later on in the unit too. So we can also see the age of the author, sex, type of author, and at the bottom you'll notice there's a big, perhaps the largest category, and this is the genre of the text. These genres were created, or rather kind of identified by somebody called David Lee, and here is a description of what they are. You can also read more about this in publications by David Lee, which are available online. So these are some of the written restrictions we can place. If you just wanted, for example, to look at all those texts written by a male author for a particular word, you could do that. Perhaps one other thing I should mention is I don't think that all of these categories are complete. They might not have information about, for example, the target audience age for every single text in the corpus. However, when we come to spoken restrictions, we'll find they're even less reliable often. So let's have a quick look at spoken restrictions. So we might have overall restrictions for texts between demographically sampled, that's conversations, and or context governed, that is more formal interactions like meetings, conferences, things like that. We could look at just monologues, dialogues, regions where the spoken text was captured. Obviously this might not tell us all that much about the speakers, the actual speakers involved. Again, we've got the David Lee's genres, spoken genres here. So these are some of the text restrictions. And we move on here to the speaker restrictions, which would be according to age, sex, social class, various education, dialect, accent. You'll note here that they've put this, as mentioned in the unit, in fact, this is a very unreliable category, the dialect or accent. Another thing we probably notice is that for each of these categories there's an unknown, suggesting that we don't have information for every single speaker who's recorded. But obviously the way that they were recorded, it wasn't possible to get this information about everyone. And also we have domain here. One other thing that's kind of interesting is the age of respondent, who was being spoken to, social class. Although you should notice too that this refers to the whole text. So again, we could, choose a particular restriction, like we're only interested in people over 60 who use a particular word, and then search for it. We'd find of those instances according to that restriction. Of course, one other way of looking at the metadata in the BNC is when one does an actual search. If I do a search for a very common word, to save time I'll restrict it to written text for now. And when we get, you've probably noticed this already, but when we get the results page up, we also get the file names, and hovering over any of the file names, you'll be able to see the metadata for that particular text. So this gives us a lot of the information we saw on the restrictions page. And if we do the same thing for spoken, we'll find the same thing, although the information, of course, for spoken text is slightly different. In this case, we don't seem to have a lot of information. Oh yes, no, we don't have a lot of information about the speaker, but we could get to that by looking at who Joy is. If we come here, Joy, she's a particular speaker, and we probably have quite a lot of information recorded about her, although we don't know her education or her first language. I think that's the main ways of accessing the metadata, except of course we'll be looking at distribution later, which tells us a bit more.